Hello everyone, welcome to our lecture for Chapter 1 in the Introduction to Corporate Finance. We're now in week 5 of the class and we're going to start the finance portion of our studies. The chapter that we're going to look at, Chapter 1, has a couple of different topics. Corporate finance and the financial manager, different forms of business organization, the goal of financial management, and the agency problem and control of the corporation. We're going to first look at corporate finance and the financial manager from an overview perspective. What's the purpose here? We're going to skip the section on financial markets. It's just not relevant to our studies. Some important questions that can be answered using finance are the following. First, what long-term investments should the firm take on? Second, where will we get the long-term financing to pay for the investment? And third, how will we manage the everyday financial activities of the firm? All of these questions are answered using finance and financial concepts. Financial managers are present in every company, whether or not they have a separate title. That function is performed by someone. There's usually a chief financial officer, who's the top financial manager within a firm. Sometimes there's a treasurer that oversees cash management, credit management, capital expenditures, and financial planning. And sometimes there's a controller, usually a CPA, overseeing the taxes, cost accounting, financial accounting, and data processing. There are several financial management decisions that financial professionals support and get involved in making. And you as an environmental manager will also get involved in these decisions. The first type is capital budgeting. What long-term investments or projects should the business take on? The second type of decision is around capital structure. How should we pay for our assets and how should we use debt or equity? The third type of decision is working capital management. How do we manage the day-to-day finances of the firm? So these are the three primary areas in which financial management decisions are made, and in which you're going to get involved as an environmental manager, because the implications of your decisions affect these decisions. There are different forms of business organization within the world. We're going to look at a couple of them. Within the U.S., there's what we know as a sole proprietorship, a partnership, and a corporation. These are three separate forms of organization. A sole proprietorship is a single owner company. The partnerships can be general or limited, and a corporation can be a C corporation, an S corporation, or a limited liability company. The sole proprietorship is a very common form of organization. It has several advantages. It's very easy to start. It's the least regulated. A single owner keeps all of the profits. The income from the business is taxed once income. However, there are several important disadvantages. The proprietorship essentially ends when the owner dies. It's limited to the life of the owner. The equity capital is limited to the owner's personal wealth, which means that the owner's personal assets, can be used to pay off the debts of the business. It has unlimited liability, which means that the owner is responsible for all the debts, and it's difficult to sell the ownership interest. Partnerships, on the other hand, are a little bit different. There are two types, the general partnership and the limited partnership. There are several advantages to partnerships. They generally have two or more owners, several owners. There's more capital available because there's just more people to provide it. They are relatively easy to start, and as with sole proprietorships, the income is taxed once as per income. There are several important disadvantages, though. There is unlimited liability for each partner, so you had better know your partners very well. Partnership remains only as long as all of the partners remain a part of it. So it dissolves when one partner dies or wishes to sell. It's also difficult to transfer ownership. Partnership is predicated on specific individuals being the partner. The third form of business organization is a corporation. And we see here that there are three types, basic types: a C corporation, S corporation, and limited liability. There are several advantages for incorporating. The managers have limited liability, and the owners or the shareholders or the liability is limited to the price they paid for their shares. They do have unlimited life, although this wasn't always true. There's a separation of ownership and management. In other words, the share owners are not the ones generally who run the company. This could be advantageous because you can hire professional managers. And transfer of ownership is relatively easy. You can sell your shares or sell your interests. It's also easier to raise capital through the capital market. There are several important disadvantages, though, to the corporate form of business. The separation of ownership and management creates something called agency problems. And there's also double taxation. The income is taxed at the corporate rate, and then dividends are taxed at the personal rate. The goal of financial management is very important to understand. What should be the goal of a corporation? Why should a corporation exist? Should it exist to maximize profits, to minimize costs, to maximize market share, maximize the current value of the company's stock? Does this mean we should do anything and everything to maximize owner wealth? And this traditional view, where a corporation and the financial management of a corporation is dedicated to maximizing owner wealth, is coming under some fire because we're seeing an evolving view called the stakeholder view, in that corporations have multiple constituencies, and the managers have responsibilities beyond maximizing owner wealth, which is share price. And so this traditional view is breaking down, especially in the environmental arena. We're seeing new forms of corporations emerge, such as the B or benefit corporation, where legally the managers are required to maximize owner wealth as well as look after stakeholder interests. One of the problems with corporations is the agency problem, control. The agency relationship is important to understand because a principal hires an agent to represent his or her interests. The stockholders in a corporation or the principals, and they hire managers to run the company. So the agency problem is that there's a conflict of interest between the principal and agent. The principal wants to maximize their investment, but the agent wants to maximize their income or perhaps their power or control over the organization. So there we see that this creates an inherent conflict of interest. There are lots of different ways to deal with this. Most often it's visible in different management goals and agency costs, which are result of conflicting goals between the principal and the agent, or between the owners, or stockholders, and the manager. When we look at managerial compensation, this is an area in which we can make a difference in reducing the agency problem. We can have incentives that can be used to align management and stockholder interests, but we really need to make sure that they're structured carefully to achieve their goal. If we're not careful, we can actually make the agency problem worse. Corporate control is important because the threat of a takeover may result in better management, and because management is self-interested in preserving their own positions and their own status and their own jobs. Other stakeholders can get involved. NGOs can get involved and make sure that the agency problem is reduced, and that the interests of stakeholders, including stockholders, are aligned. There are some ethical issues around business corporations. These are some questions for you to think about. Is it ethical for tobacco companies to sell a product that is known to be addictive and a danger to the health of the user? I mean, is it relevant that the product is legal? Because it's legal, does that mean that it's ethical and that they should be doing it? Should boards of directors consider only price when faced with a buyout offer? Should the interests of stakeholders be considered? And is it ethical to concentrate only on shareholder wealth, or should stakeholders as a whole be considered? And these are things that can be answered only with ethical theories. And finally, should firms be penalized for attempting to improve returns by stifling competition? We're seeing a lot of this going on right now between Microsoft and Apple. So in this chapter, make sure that you understand the key concepts and the skills, the role of the financial manager, the corporation classifications, the goal of financial management, and the potential conflicts between financial managers and shareholders. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A thread. Otherwise, we'll see you in the class shell.